Unbelievable truth. Victor discovers Phyllis was Matt's secret accomplice in Nikki's kidnapping. In a twist that sends shockwaves through Genoa City, the carefully guarded empire of Victor Newman begins to tremble when a long-buried truth claws its way to the surface. On The Young and the Restless, secrets never stay buried forever, but this revelation is more explosive than anyone could have imagined. The story begins with lingering questions surrounding Nikki's harrowing kidnapping ordeal, a trauma that nearly destroyed the Newman family from the inside out. For months, Victor believed the nightmare had been orchestrated solely by the volatile and vengeful Matt, a man with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Victor used every ounce of his power to hunt him down, determined to protect his wife and punish anyone who dared threaten the Newman legacy. What Victor never considered, what he refused to consider, was the possibility that someone closer to home had been pulling strings behind the scenes. And when clues begin to resurface, pointing toward Phyllis Summers as Matt's secret accomplice, the foundation of trust and rivalry in Genoa City begins to crack beyond repair. It starts subtly. Victor notices inconsistencies in old security footage, timestamps that don't align, calls that were mysteriously rerouted, and financial transactions that had once seemed unrelated. For years, he dismissed them as random anomalies. But after Nikki experiences a panic attack triggered by a familiar ringtone, one that Matt had used during her captivity, Victor's instincts roar back to life. He reopens the investigation quietly, using trusted contacts outside the usual Newman Enterprises channels. What he finds is chilling. Encrypted messages between Matt and an anonymous sender. Payments funneled through shell corporations. And one familiar digital signature buried beneath layers of cyber camouflage, a signature that traces back to Phyllis. Phyllis Summers has always been a wild card. Brilliant, impulsive, and fiercely protective of her own interests, she has clashed with Victor countless times. Their rivalry is legendary, fueled by mutual distrust and personal vendettas. Yet even Victor never believed she would go so far as to endanger Nikki's life. When he first sees the evidence, he refuses to accept it. He orders a second verification, then a third. Each time, the results are the same. The metadata doesn't lie. The bank transfers were authorized through an account tied to a Jabot consultant profile, one that only Phyllis had access to during that period. More damning still is a recovered voice recording, enhanced through forensic technology, in which a woman's voice gives Matt precise instructions about Nikki's transport schedule. The voice is distorted, but the cadence, the sharp inflection on certain words, it's unmistakably Phyllis. Victor's fury simmers beneath a veneer of icy control. He doesn't confront her immediately. Instead, he observes. He watches how she interacts with Jack, how she defends herself in casual conversations, how she reacts whenever Nikki's kidnapping is mentioned. There are micro-expressions, brief flashes of discomfort, a tightening around the eyes, that confirm his suspicions. Victor shares the findings only with Michael Baldwin, demanding absolute discretion. Michael is stunned. He has represented Phyllis in the past. He knows her capacity for recklessness, but kidnapping? Conspiracy? It seems unthinkable. Yet the evidence is mounting, and Victor's resolve is unshakable. Meanwhile, Nikki remains unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. She has worked tirelessly to rebuild her sense of security, leaning on her family and trying to reclaim normalcy. The idea that someone she has crossed paths with socially, someone who attended galas and shared polite smiles, could have orchestrated her terror is almost too much to bear. When Victor finally decides to tell her, he does so gently but firmly. Nikki is devastated. Her first reaction is disbelief. Her second is heartbreak. She recalls moments when Phyllis offered sympathy during her recovery. Were those gestures genuine, or were they performances designed to conceal guilt? The truth begins unraveling publicly when Victor summons Phyllis to his office under the guise of discussing a business matter. The tension in the room is palpable. Victor presents the evidence piece by piece, watching her carefully. At first, Phyllis laughs it off, accusing him of another power play. But as he reveals the forensic audio analysis and the financial trails, her composure falters. She denies direct involvement in the physical kidnapping but admits to contacting Matt. Her explanation is as twisted as it is shocking. She claims she never intended for Nikki to be harmed. According to her, she had been manipulating Matt, feeding him limited information to scare the Newmans and expose Victor's vulnerabilities. It was, in her mind, a strategic move, one that spiraled out of control when Matt became more unstable than she anticipated. Victor is unmoved by her justifications. To him, intent is irrelevant. Nikki was traumatized. The family was shattered. Phyllis's so-called strategy nearly cost lives. The confrontation explodes into a war of words, dredging up decades of resentment. Phyllis accuses Victor of hypocrisy, reminding him of the countless schemes he has orchestrated in the name of protecting his family. She argues that she learned from the best, that in Genoa City, survival demands ruthless tactics. Victor fires back that there is a line, and she crossed it the moment she aligned herself with a criminal. News of the confrontation spreads quickly. Jack Abbott is blindsided. His complicated history with Phyllis resurfaces, forcing him to question his judgment once again. He defends her publicly at first, insisting there must be context missing. But privately, he demands the truth. Phyllis admits to partial involvement but insists she was never the mastermind. The strain on their relationship becomes unbearable. Jack feels betrayed, not only by her actions but by her failure to confide in him. As the investigation becomes official, law enforcement steps in. Michael advises Phyllis to cooperate fully, warning her that conspiracy charges could carry severe consequences. The courtroom drama looms on the horizon, threatening to divide Genoa City into factions. Some believe Phyllis's claim that she lost control of a calculated plan. Others see her as a calculating accomplice who gambled with Nikki's life. Nikki's emotional journey becomes the heart of the story. She grapples with anger, fear, and a profound sense of violation. In a powerful scene, she confronts Phyllis face to face. There are no theatrics, only raw pain. Nikki demands to know why. Phyllis struggles to articulate her motives without sounding monstrous. She speaks of desperation, of feeling overshadowed and underestimated, of wanting leverage in a world dominated by Victor's power. But her words ring hollow against Nikki's lived trauma. Victor, for his part, channels his rage into action. He tightens security around his family and begins dismantling every professional connection Phyllis has left. Yet beneath his anger is a deeper wound, the realization that his long-standing feud blinded him to a threat hiding in plain sight. He vows that this betrayal will not go unanswered. As episodes unfold, alliances shift. Some characters question whether Victor's own history of manipulation contributed to the environment that fostered such extreme retaliation. Others argue that personal vendettas should never escalate to criminal conspiracy. The moral ambiguity that defines Genoa City is on full display. In the end, the unbelievable truth isn't just that Phyllis aided Matt. It's that years of rivalry, pride, and unchecked ambition culminated in a catastrophe that nearly destroyed them all. On The Young and the Restless, actions echo across generations, and every secret carries a cost. Victor's discovery reshapes relationships, redraws battle lines, and leaves viewers questioning who the real villain is in a world where power and passion collide. As the fallout intensifies on The Young and the Restless, the emotional and psychological repercussions of Victor's discovery ripple far beyond the initial confrontation. Genoa City becomes a pressure cooker of suspicion, loyalty tests, and buried resentments clawing their way to the surface. What began as a shocking revelation about Phyllis' secret alliance with Matt evolves into a full-scale war, one that threatens to permanently fracture families, destroy legacies, and redefine power in the Newman dynasty. Victor does not believe in half measures. Once convinced of betrayal, he moves with strategic precision. He commissions a deeper forensic reconstruction of the kidnapping timeline. Every phone ping, every surveillance glitch, every vehicle movement. The reconstruction paints an even darker picture. It reveals that on the night Nikki was moved between safe houses, a traffic camera malfunctioned for exactly 11 minutes. That outage, investigators discover, was triggered remotely. The coding signature once again traces back to a system Phyllis had access to during a cybersecurity consultation months earlier. The implication is chilling. Without that window, Matt might never have successfully transported Nikki undetected. When Victor presents this new information to Nikki, her devastation turns to something colder: resolve. Nikki refuses to remain a passive victim in her own story. She begins attending strategy meetings with Victor and Michael. She wants accountability. Not revenge, accountability. Yet Victor's definition of accountability has always leaned dangerously close to annihilation. Phyllis, meanwhile, feels the walls closing in. Public whispers intensify. Invitations dry up. Jabo's board grows uneasy. Even her daughter Summer senses something is deeply wrong. Summer confronts her mother after overhearing fragments of a heated phone call. Phyllis initially deflects, insisting Victor is manufacturing evidence. But Summer, perceptive and emotionally intelligent, notices the cracks in her mother's bravado. When Phyllis finally admits she communicated with Matt before the kidnapping, Summer is horrified. "You played with a monster," Summer tells her. "You don't get to act surprised when he acts like one." Those words cut deeper than any accusation from Victor ever could. At Newman Enterprises, Victoria and Nick are divided. Victoria aligns firmly with their father. To her, this is a calculated attack on their mother and the family's stability. She views Phyllis' actions as an unforgivable escalation in a long-standing feud. Nick, however, is conflicted. His complicated history with Phyllis clouds his judgment. He knows her capacity for recklessness, but he also knows her vulnerability. He struggles to reconcile the woman he once loved with the conspirator described in Victor's evidence. Nick seeks out Phyllis privately. In a tense exchange, he demands to know whether she ever considered Nikki's safety while feeding information to Matt. Phyllis breaks down, not theatrically, but genuinely. She insists she believed she could control the narrative. She thought Matt wanted leverage, not violence. She thought she was orchestrating fear, not facilitating terror. Nick listens, but he doesn't excuse her. He leaves her apartment shaken, realizing that even unintended consequences can be catastrophic. Meanwhile, Michael Baldwin prepares for what appears inevitable: criminal proceedings. The district attorney's office begins assembling a case for conspiracy and accessory charges. The prosecution's strategy is clear. They will argue that Phyllis knowingly provided material support that enabled a felony kidnapping. Intent may mitigate sentencing, but it won't erase culpability. Jack Abbott becomes increasingly isolated. His loyalty to Phyllis puts him at odds with both Victor and segments of his own family. He confronts her again, this time demanding full transparency. In a rare moment of total honesty, Phyllis confesses the origin of her scheme. Months before the kidnapping, she had been investigating Victor's offshore dealings, convinced he was preparing a corporate maneuver that would undermine Jabo. During that investigation, she encountered Matt, who harbored his own vendetta against the Newmans. She saw an opportunity: feed him selective intel, let him rattle Victor, expose vulnerabilities in Newman security. She never intended for Nikki to become collateral damage. But when Matt escalated, she panicked. Instead of coming forward, she tried to quietly steer him away. Too late. Jack's reaction is not explosive. It's sorrowful. "You thought you were the smartest person in the room," he tells her. "And now everyone's paying for it." The courtroom arc begins with a dramatic arraignment. Cameras line the courthouse steps. Genoa City buzzes with divided opinion. Some see Phyllis as a reckless strategist whose hubris spiraled. Others see her as a villain who gambled with a woman's life. During preliminary hearings, the prosecution introduces the enhanced voice recording. Forensic experts testify about digital signatures and encrypted transfers. Michael counters by highlighting lack of direct evidence proving Phyllis intended harm. He frames her as negligent, not malicious. The legal chess match mirrors the broader thematic conflict of the show: intention versus impact. Nikki ultimately takes the stand during a key evidentiary hearing. Her testimony is measured but powerful. She recounts the isolation, the fear, the uncertainty of not knowing whether she would survive. She doesn't embellish. She doesn't dramatize. She simply speaks the truth of her trauma. When asked whether she believes Phyllis intended her suffering, Nikki pauses. "Intent doesn't erase experience," she says quietly. "I lived through it." The courtroom falls silent. Victor watches every second, his jaw set. He does not cry. He does not look away. But the depth of his protective instinct is unmistakable. Outside the legal arena, the psychological consequences deepen. Phyllis begins experiencing anxiety attacks, ironic echoes of the trauma she helped unleash. She confides in a therapist, admitting that her need to outmaneuver Victor has defined too much of her life. The rivalry became identity. Outsmarting him became validation. And that obsession blinded her to escalating danger. Summer wrestles with public backlash. Social media commentary becomes brutal. She stands by her mother publicly but privately establishes boundaries. "I love you," she tells Phyllis. "But loving you doesn't mean pretending you didn't make a catastrophic mistake." Nick's relationship with his father deteriorates. He argues that Victor's relentless vendettas create an environment where extreme retaliation feels inevitable. Victor counters that moral responsibility lies with the individual, not the rivalry. Their clash reflects generational differences in how power is wielded and accountability defined. As weeks pass, a plea deal is offered. Reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation and testimony about Matt's network. Phyllis faces a crossroads. Accepting means admitting culpability publicly. Rejecting means risking prison. In an emotionally charged episode, she visits Nikki alone before making her decision. There are no cameras, no lawyers, just two women shaped by ambition and rivalry. Phyllis apologizes, not defensively, not strategically, but sincerely. She acknowledges that her ego and resentment fueled catastrophic choices. Nikki listens, arms folded, eyes guarded. "I don't forgive you," Nikki says finally. "But I don't want to become someone consumed by hatred either." That fragile acknowledgement marks a turning point, not reconciliation, but recognition of shared humanity. Phyllis ultimately accepts the plea. She agrees to testify fully about her communications with Matt, helping authorities dismantle remaining threats. She receives a suspended sentence with probation, community service, and significant financial penalties. It's not prison, but it's far from absolution. Victor remains unsatisfied. Legal consequences feel insufficient compared to the emotional toll. Yet Nikki urges restraint. "We survived," she tells him. "Let that be enough." In the aftermath, relationships remain altered. Trust is fragile. Business alliances shift. The Newman-Abbott rivalry simmers at a lower boil, tempered by the recognition that escalation carries devastating cost. The storyline closes not with triumphant victory, but with sober reflection. In Genoa City, power games have real casualties. Ambition without boundaries breeds chaos. And even the most brilliant strategist can become ensnared by her own schemes. Victor stands in his office overlooking the city skyline, contemplating the thin line between protector and aggressor. Across town, Phyllis stares at her reflection, forced to confront the consequences of mistaking manipulation for control. On The Young and the Restless, the most explosive truths aren't just about who did what, they're about why. And in this unforgettable arc, the answer is painfully clear. Pride, rivalry, and the illusion of invincibility nearly destroyed them all. In the quiet weeks that follow the plea agreement, Genoa City settles into an uneasy calm, but the emotional foreshocks continue to resonate through every corner of life on The Young and the Restless. For Victor, the resolution feels deficient. Though the legal system delivered consequences, he knows reports heal faster than recollections. He tightens his inner circle, restructuring security protocols at Newman Enterprises and limiting access indeed among longtime abettors. Trust, formerly fractured, isn't fluently restored. Nikki, still, begins reclaiming pieces of herself that were stolen during her prison. She throws herself into charity work supporting trauma survivors, transubstantiating pain into purpose. In doing so, she refuses to allow Phyllis, or Matt, to define her heritage as a victim. Her strength becomes a quiet reproach to the chaos that formerly girdled her. Phyllis faces a different kind of reckoning, rebuilding credibility in a megacity that thrives on gossip. Community service humbles her. Public scrutiny forces her to defy uncomfortable trueness about pride and control. For the first time in times, she operates without a grand strategy, just day-to-day responsibility. Nick maintains conservative distance. Victoria remains openly distrustful. Jack watches from hence, uncertain whether redemption is possible but unintentional to abolish their participated history. The lines of contest still live, but commodity abecedarian has shifted. The war between the Newmans and Phyllis is no longer fueled by eyeless fury, it is tempered by the understanding that escalation nearly destroyed them all. In Genoa City, the game's no way truly end. But occasionally, survival itself becomes the most important palm.